Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you very much, Masahide Sasaki and the other organizers for setting this up and giving us the opportunity to talk about our efforts towards a North American quantum network. Is it better now? Okay. Yeah, our contribution to somehow work on during the next 10 years to make QKD a success. So thanks to the introduction of Nicolas, we know, and this morning conference, we know the advantages and limitations of QKD. Let me briefly repeat them. For me, the most important advantages, similar to what Nicolas just mentioned, is that the security of QKD is based on fundamental physical principles, and that we somehow can at least prove the principal information theoretically to be secure, in contrast to other post-quantum algorithms, where we simply always have this tiny bit of assumptions and uncertainty. Are there algorithms which we don't know yet, which could break those systems? And this guaranteeing then this forward security, secret now, secret forever. Actually, in one point, I might a little bit disagree with what Nicolas mentioned. I think the key rates we achieved today in the order of megabit per second over rather shorter distances are very high, and well, one has to do quite a lot of efforts in order to achieve them using, for example, RSA, where typical encryption, key generation, decryption operations take up to hundreds of milliseconds in an FPGA. So one has to do really a lot of parallelization and efforts in order to come to those ranges of megabits per second. Limitations are clearly the point-to-point connectivity of standard QKD systems, the limited distance to a few hundred kilometers, where with a lot of efforts concerning the detector technology, one could increment this over up to 400 kilometers. And the last one, which I will also focus on during this talk, is a lack of a security standard for certification, which in certain areas of applications is important. And so this is what those three limitations is what we try to target with our development, together with ID Quantique in our so-called trusted node QKD network. So trusted node networks, we have seen one big one, famous one this morning. Ours is similar to this in that we use nodes which have to, where we need a certain amount of trust in order to distribute keys over long distances. We do it in this way, that this is a simple chain network, but we can imagine it to be much longer in whatever topology. We assume that this is our initial node, where we generate a user key. So the user requests to distribute a key to this node. We then use this quantum key to, first we use a public key with the end node to encrypt this user key using public key infrastructure, RSA based or similar based, which is the first level of security. And then we use the quantum keys to encrypt them a second time, send them over the intermediate node, decrypt it with this quantum key, send it to the second part here, re-encrypt with the second quantum key until it reaches the final node. And the use of this second key is, in fact, in order to reduce the trust we need in this intermediate node, since it's not directly visible to this intermediate node, and also it helps us to provide this certification. And so, in principle, we can now extend this network to provide or distribute keys over a network with a large amount of users over large distances. So this hardware, in contrast to what we've seen today, is all integrated into a small single blade, which is compatible with this ATCA standard. Here is a typical rack of this ATCA, Advanced Telecommunication Computing Architecture, which is a 19-inch rack. And then one can configure it with several blades, encryptors, routers, switchers, QKD systems, as it is demanded for the network topology and application. This ATCA standard has several advantages. It's quite often used in telecommunication industries. It provides already some services like cooling, voltages, power supplies, etc. And we now develop a blade here, which consists of two parts: our quantum key engine, which is based on the COW protocol, and a quantum key controller, which does all this encryption of user keys in order to distribute the key over the network. And then we have a trusted node controller, which manages the route tables of the network, finds the best way through the network, based on this Dijkstra low-cost path algorithm, and also use alternative paths if available or multiple paths. So next couple of slides, I spent a bit on our efforts why certification. In information security systems, the goal is to store, generate, or otherwise process keys in a secure manner, and QKD is only one building block of this whole infrastructure. And usually certification now provides means in order to somehow guarantee a user in a production environment that this device is correctly implemented, or even in governmental applications that's actually required. Especially in the US, it's the FIPS 140 standard, which we use here, which is required in order to use a security system to be used by the governments. And then once one has this certificate of certification, it guarantees that this device is properly implemented, that it counters all the attacks which it is supposed to counter, and somehow provides then this trust, which in order to provides the trust to an end user of the QKD device. So far, there have been already a couple of efforts in order to develop QKD standards. The first one started in scope of the CCOR QC project in 2008, but unfortunately at this time the key management layer, there was a protection profile, a certification standard developed, but not the QKD system itself. It was somehow found out that the methodology in order to access the security of this device was not ready at this time, and this led actually to the creation of this ETSI QKD group, with one approach considering a QKD system as a distributed random number generator, and again somehow one ran into the same problem, and then finally the ETSI group started to develop a real standard which takes into account all the implementation imperfections of detectors, etc., based on the security proofs in order to somehow compare the real implementation with the theoretical assumptions and incorporate those into standards, and to develop also methods how those devices or components are measured, characterized, and then implemented. So at the moment there are, if I'm correctly informed, 24 members from the academia and industry, and Andrew Shields leading this group at the moment. Unfortunately, they are not still yet there that we can use those standards in order to apply them to our system. And the second group or effort, which has started roughly a year ago and was initiated by Adi Quantique and Bartel, was in the scope of the Cloud Security Alliance, which is a big alliance of telecom and cloud security providers, with a general goal. And in the quantum safe security working group meet people from both the QKD as well as the post-quantum side in order to somehow promote the post-quantum security side in telecom. They don't develop themselves standards, but they somehow try to bring people together and also help ETSI and other parts to develop those standards. So at the moment there are 94 members of 40 organizational enterprises. We have published a couple of papers, white papers for post-quantum cryptography, QKD, and it's open to anybody from government, enterprises, academia, so new members are always welcome. Our QKD blade, the effort, or the goal is to make it compliant with the FIPS 140 standard, which is the US standard and required by the US government. And it has 4 security levels and 11 areas of requirements. I don't go into the details here. I put the slide on for everybody who is interested, but it covers a lot of those things which physicists usually call like those are engineering tasks. We don't have to cope with them, but in order to develop a product, a final product, one unfortunately has to implement them. And most importantly, it gives strict rules about the cryptographic key management, so how keys are generated, stored, deleted, distributed, which kind of ports are used, where the data comes in and out, and the physical security, like what has to be done in order to physically protect the device. Another part also which I would like to mention, self-tests. So for example, that every algorithm which is implemented in such a device has to run certain self-tests on start, but also continuously during the run of the key distribution. So the problem is that the methods we use in QKD are definitely not the methods which are defined by this FIPS standard. So what can we do at the moment in order to make it compliant with those ones? So all the parts which we do in or the functions which you apply here in this quantum key controller, the encryption of the user keys with the quantum keys, there we all use approved methods like AES or other encryption methods. But in order to be then compliant with the standards, also all the inputs like this random number generator, which we use to generate the user key initially, have to be approved methods. And there, as Nicolas mentioned, we use this Quantis random number generator from ID Quantique, who recently also passed this AIS 21 and 30 standard from the German Federal Information Security Organization. And by applying a wrapper, a random number generator, which is approved around the physical input. And we do something similar here for the key distribution engine in order to make those keys compliant with the standard and fed them to the quantum key controller. So how do we do this? Well, one common approach, which is probably done most of the times today with QKD systems, is to take this key and use it as a kind of additional input into a deterministic random number generator, and then take this output of this random number generator to feed to the application, encryptors, etc. The problem is here that the QKD system itself is completely out of scope of the certification process, and certain environments cannot be used in this case. And also we lose the information theoretical security of the QKD. So one step further would be to do all this in the QKD engine itself. Then at least the QKD engine would be also part of the certification process and would have to be evaluated and certified, and could then be used in some, for example, governmental environments. But again, we lose the information theoretical security. And luckily, there's one approach which helps most, and this is actually to take the QKD key and XOR it with another approved method, and by this generating the final key, which is used by the external application. And by this, we finally maintain this information theoretically security. I mean, we are really happy once we found out that this is actually a FIPS-approved method. So this is a conceptual sketch of how the blade looks like. It's really a very small footprint of 280 times 322 millimeters. We have an example over in the booth at ID Quantique in the industry hall. The whole blade is encapsulated by a solid metal enclosure which serves to protect the security of the blade physically, but also somehow helps us to reduce the heat internally. We have a lot of temper detection switches and other methods in order to prevent eavesdropping and tampering with the system. And it also shields against electromagnetic radiation. So here in the back we have actually the slots which connect then to the ATCA shelf, and where the key gets transferred, where the power is connected, etc. So inside we have here in the bottom part is the optical part, the Coherent One-Way system. Here on the top part we have all the FPGAs to regulate and distill the keys. This back part is the quantum key controller, which does all the encryption and user key distribution. And this small part here is the detector, again completely encapsulated to prevent eavesdropping and tampering. And we use this quantum random number generator as physical base of the random keys. System is based on this Coherent One-Way protocol, which Nicolas Duzang mentioned already, where we use a continuous emitting laser and then an intensity modulator in order to shape the sequence of random bits, which either pulls in this time bin to encode a bit 0 or a bit 1 in this time bin. And in this interferometer, we measure the coherence across two pulses to verify the security. And as you mentioned before, we have this inherent robustness against the blinding attack due to this highly imbalanced beam splitter here. We also implemented before at university already an FPGA for the key distillation based on an LDPC error correction, triplet hashing for the privacy amplification, does the authentication, error estimation, all in a very fast FPGA in order to support this 625 megabit clock QKD engine. This is a picture of how the blades look like at the moment. Here's this ATCA rack with one blade here opened like this with the optical part in the bottom, and the host card picture, which was recently shown at the single photon workshop in Geneva.
Excuse me to interrupt. Chairman here. Hello.
Yeah. Yes.
If you want question, you should wrap up, because in 4 minutes and a half you're finished.
Okay.
So you can continue, but then it's at the expense of questions.
Okay. Then just the first characterization we did with the system, we had 1 kilobit per second up to a distance of 90 kilometers, with all integrated with the security parameter, the failure probability of the system of 4 to the power of -10, and quite stable operation over a short term. And we want to integrate it soon into our Battelle test network in the Columbus area, here where we have 600 kilometers of fiber, which is a test network for quantum communication, open to everybody who wants to do research and field tests in this one on a non-profit basis. And the outlook I skip and summarize, and hope they've shown you that the QKD Trusted Node Network is a versatile, scalable solution for this distance and multi-user problem in a telecom ATCA compatible hardware, uses the Coherent One-Way system in a very fast implementation with hardware distillation, and aims at a certification for the application in governmental and other important security areas. And yeah, as mentioned before, the Battelle network is open for researchers all over the world for field tests. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We still have 3 minutes for questions. The microphone.
Hello, it's about the cow protocol, because you saw there are some results about what kind of performance you can expect, but as far as I know, the scaling of the cow protocol, in the lower bounds that we have for the key generation rate, the scaling so far is not very good. So I was wondering whether these kind of results, similar to the ones of the previous talk that were to 300 kilometers, are only valid against particular kinds of attacks, say collective attacks or something like that.
No, it's the same level of attacks, the same security proofs. The main difference are the detectors. As with most QKD systems, the performance depends on the detectors, and the detectors which were used in this 307 kilometer experiment were those ultra low noise cooled single photon APDs. And here we use some very small form factor free running detectors. They are not gated and adapted to this low footprint. So this is why they have a bit, like they are not cooled as low as those ultra cold detectors, and by this higher noise and shorter distance.
Any other question? Nicolas?
So yeah, I think that the answer to the question is simply yes, it is secure against collective attacks, but not against coherent attacks. So more precisely, we don't know about coherent attacks because of this continuous series of pulses. But against collective attacks, it is secure. It is provenly secure, and including finite key analysis. I think that's what the gentleman was asking.
Well, there is no more question, then, yep, Vadim.
A short question. So, will the expansion to Washington happen for the network?
Excuse me.
Is the network going to be expanded in the future?
Yes, that's the idea. So we start with this part in the Columbus area where we plan to have 4 nodes, and then we actually already have some agreements for fibers up to the Washington areas, but not yet the system. So the systems are the expensive part, and actually also there's a short link which is still missing to go to these Washington areas. But the idea is definitely to spread out from this center, the Battelle network, use it first for internal communication between several facilities in this area, and then go, from there.
Well, thank you again, Nino.